Welcome to this session on design thinking, a business building tool. Here's what you can expect from this session. I'm quickly going to tell you about Maloba Consulting Services so that you can see how you can benefit from it regardless of where you are on the entrepreneurial spectrum. Then, by way of introduction, we're going to quickly look at tools needed to build a startup and as well look at the definition of a startup. We're also going to talk about product market fit. Then we're going to discuss at length the design thinking process. And then we're going to bring everything together, look at the case study to see how a group of young students use the design thinking process to build a successful startup, which is having major impact here in Africa. Then we're going to close with some remarks. So let's get started. Maloba Consulting is it's all about empowering people and organizations to become agents of national economic growth through innovation and entrepreneurship. We have various services that you can benefit from regardless of where you are on your entrepreneurial journey, whether you are a student entrepreneur, whether you are a startup, either an early stage startup or a later stage startup. We have services and packages appropriate for you, tailor-made, curated for your specific needs. We also have bespoke programs for corporate organizations, and we also help people transition. If you, for instance, want to move into the African entrepreneurial startup ecosystem, we expose you to the right networks. We help you have a soft landing, so to speak. Now let's dive into today's topic. But before we talk too much about design thinking, I'd like to ask you a question. What do you need to build a successful startup? Please leave your answers in the comment below, and I'll be curious to review them later on. But here's what I think you need to build a startup. You need to first identify a problem worth solving. You need to find people who can relate to that problem, and you need to think of innovative ways to solve that problem. Then you need to find paying customers. If you can have all of these four elements, you can build a startup. I'm not saying it's going to be a successful startup, but I'm saying you can build a startup with these elements. There's an entrepreneur, an investor by the name of Peter Thiel. He's also an author who wrote the book 0 to 1, which I actually recommend you to read. In his book, this is how he approaches creating a new startup. It says for you to create a startup, you need to answer the contrarian question. The contrarian question is basically the following. What important truth do very few people agree with you on? Put in business term, you can ask it this way. What valuable company is nobody building? So if you can identify a delusional popular belief, you can find what lies hidden behind it. Basically, the secret to a great company reside in finding the answer to the contrarian question. That's how he puts it, and that's how you build a startup. Because if you answer the contrarian question, it takes you to the 0 to 1 stage, which is the innovative stage. So what is a startup? Again, I'll be curious to know what your answers are. Please leave them in the comments. I'll give you a few definitions. There are various definitions out there, but I'll give you a few definitions from entrepreneurs that I've learned from, and I'll also give you my own definition of what I think is a startup. First, we have Steve Blank, who's an American investor entrepreneur. He defines a startup like this: a series of untested hypotheses. Then we have Peter Thiel, whom I've just mentioned. It defines a startup as the largest group of people you can convince of a plan to build a different future. Then we have Eric Ries, who is also the author of The Lean Startup. He defines it like this: a human institution designated to deliver a new product or service under conditions of extreme uncertainty. And here's how I think of a startup: a venture with a flexible business model and the potential to scale. I'll be curious to know what is your definition of a startup. Now, there's three important ingredients that one needs to build a successful startup. Remember, keyword here is successful startup. We're not just talking about building a startup, we're talking about building a successful startup. Can you guess what those three ingredients are? To talk about these three ingredients in business term, we refer to them as product market fit. What is product market fit? Product market fit is a combination of three elements: desirability, feasibility, and viability. By desirability, we mean market desirability, and by feasibility, we mean technological feasibility, and by viability, we refer to financial viability. If you find yourself at the intersection of these three elements, you can say you have product market fit. In other words, if you are about to build a startup, you can almost be assured that it's going to be a successful startup. If you are already running a startup and you find yourself at the intersections of these three elements, like you can see from the picture here, Marova Consulting find itself, you can say that you have product market fit. So what by market desirability, basically it's about what I said about identifying a problem that many people can relate with and need a solution from. So there's a demand for the solution to that problem. People want the solution that you're offering, your value proposition. People want it. People want somebody to solve that specific problem. There's a demand for that, for a certain service, for a certain product. And then technological feasibility, it's about the ability to, the capacity to be able to build the actual product, the service, right? It's one thing to say that you can build flying cars or there's a demand for it, but it's another thing to know the know-how, how to build that, the technological feasibility. Then financial viability is not just about people paying you for your services, for your product, but it's about people paying you handsomely enough so that you can still cover operational costs. And and that's what you keep on searching for. Before starting to build a business, while running a business, you keep on searching for that product market fit, the intersection of these three elements, because that's what's going to ensure that you remain a successful business. But then the question is, this sounds quite daunting. How does one go about achieving product market fit? Enters design thinking. And this is why this topic is so important today, because design thinking is a way of thinking, is a way of reasoning, it's a way of approaching and doing things, but it's also a powerful tool to validate hypotheses. It's also a powerful tool to build businesses. And we're going to look at it's a powerful tool that can be used in academic settings. But today we're going to look at design thinking in the business context. How can one use this design thinking process, the design thinking methodology, to build successful businesses to achieve product market fit? What is design thinking? Design thinking, as defined by Tim Brown, who's the executive chair of Ideate, is a human-centered approach to innovation that draws from the designer's toolkit to integrate the needs of people, the possibilities of technology, and the requirements for business success. Design thinking has 5 stages, namely empathize, define, ideate, prototype, test. Empathize is also known as customer discovery. It's about seeing the world through the lenses of your target audience. Define is about formulating a problem statement or user point of view. Ideate is coming up with the most optimal ideas to solve that problem. Prototype, it's about collecting feedback through a low-risk prototype. And then testing is about putting it into the hand of the user, again, helping you to either have early adopters or get feedback, right? You might think that this is a linear process, but it is not. It is an iterative process, meaning you can start from stage one, empathizing, and jump to ideating or jump to prototyping, then go back to define, and so on and so forth as the needs arises. You don't necessarily have to finish stage one before you can move to stage two, before you can move to stage three. Now, let's dive in right into it. What is empathizing? As I mentioned, it's about seeing the world through the lenses of your target audience, right? To create meaningful innovations, you need to know your users and care about their lives. There's a big difference between empathy and sympathy. Most of the time, people tend here to confuse the two and think that empathizing is also about sympathizing, feeling sorry for people. But here it's about understanding them, it's about caring for them. And how do you do that? You do that by living in their world. You cannot understand people, empathize with them from a distance. You need to enter the world, get out of your comfort zone, engage with them, engage with your target audience, your target users, your potential customers, learn from them, learn about their circumstances, understand them, understand what they're not saying through spoken words, understand and hear what they're saying to you through spoken word and what they're saying through the way they're living. It's only then that you can be informed well enough to actually to actually say that you understand them and you can come up with solutions for their problems. And the way to do that is to come with what we call a beginner's mindset. It's very tempting for someone who's been an entrepreneur and academics. Imagine someone who's a postdoctoral, a researcher at the university, spent years researching on a particular topic and decide he wants to create a business about that topic. It's very tempting for such a person to assume that they have all the answers because they've done the research, they've been working on this problem for a long time. And even when engaging with potential customers, they have a tendency of telling them what they have as problems and what they need as solutions. And that's not the beginner's mindset. Beginner's mindset is having a humble attitude and a curious mindset of that I truly want to understand what your world is about, what you're going through, because I care, right? It's that 5-year old mindset of constantly asking you why, not to nag you, but because they're truly curious and they truly want to understand. And there's actually a golden rule here that says if you ask why 5 times, you get to the root, the real root of a problem. And a quick tip here is to avoid leading questions. This is what's going to help you come with a beginner's mindset. Generally ask, what would you say is your biggest problem? Right? And then start from there. And generally try to engage with them and ask them why and try to learn from them. And through this process, what you want to do is create for yourself an empathy map. An empathy map is something that looks like this. So you have your user, your target user at the center, and then you want to ask, what is the big problem that this user had? And why is this problem so painful for this user? What does the user feel? And what's the outcome? What would be the consequences if this problem was left unchecked? Right? So in going through this process is going to educate you, help you understand the world of the user, and also care for them. And you might even ask them, okay, what do you think is the optimal solution for the problem that you are facing at the moment? And they will tell you, and then you take notes, and you also want to document what you are observing. Like I said, what you're hearing but that's not being said, what you are saying for yourself. It's one thing, and here this I have to caution you because you can't just say exactly what the user tell you, say this is what I need, this is my problem, because sometimes the user doesn't realize themselves that what is the true need, what is the true problem, right? And it is your job to kind of figure that out through engaging with them, asking them questions and living with them. I'll give you an example to explain what I mean. Think of Henry Ford and his Model T car when he before he created it. You remember the famous quote of his that says, "Had I asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses." Whereas people just needed to move from point A to point B. Faster, perhaps, but the point is they needed to move from point A to point B. Not necessarily they needed a horse, but what people said that is that they needed a horse because that's all they could think of. So it's your job to try and figure out what's the need beyond what's being said. And we would look on how to practically do that in the coming sections. Right. So once you're done with the empathy building, customer discovery. By the way, this is also known as customer discovery. Then you can move. It's up to you. You can move to the next stage, which is define. Define here is now it's about framing the right problem, right? Which is the only way to create the right solution. If you can't frame the problem correctly, it will be a very difficult job for you to come up with the right solution, right? And how do you do that? There are many ways of doing this, but one way that I like doing it is breaking the problem into 3 segments: the user, the needs, and insight, right? A user, you want to give a name of the user and a description, kind of creating a persona for your end user, right? The needs, so you want to have that, and then needs must be something, a deeper need of the user, not just a horse, something a bit deeper than that. And then insights must be an ideal motivation for solving the problem. So the user should be descriptive, as we've just mentioned. The need should be verbs and not nouns. A horse is a noun in the case of Henry Ford. People saying they need a horse, that's the solution that they think they need, but that's a noun. Now, how do you get to their need? You turn that into a verb by asking them, what do you need a horse for? I need the horse because I need to move my goods from this town to the another town. Okay, cool. The verb there is to move. So you need to move. Okay, you got your verb there. And then you, let's say hypothetic, and then the insight must be something compelling. Why? What will be the implications, the impact, the consequence, or the effect of moving your goods? You can put food on the table for your family by running a successful business, and so on and so forth. I give you an example. Tom, a 25-year-old entrepreneur who lives in the city, needs to learn how to build a pitch deck so that he can raise funds for his startup. Maloba Consulting can help you with that. Check us out. All right, so that's how you go about it. The next stage is ideate. Ideate, it's about coming up with the right idea. It's about generating the broadest range of possibilities, right? Identifying avenues of potential solutions that define the problem. All of this being informed on the empathy stage and the definitions that you have just come up with. Now, the Stanford D School defines ideation in their brochure and introduction to design thinking process guide. They define it as such. It is the mode of the design process in which you concentrate on idea generation. Mentally, it represents a process of going wide in terms of concept and outcomes. Ideation provides both the fuel and also the source material for building prototypes and getting innovative solutions into the hands of your users. Now, working in a team might be a bit tricky to come up with the right ideas. So you want to reframe the questions, looking at aspect of the statement to complete the sentence, how might we? Okay, so you have your problem there. Let's say Tom maybe needs to learn how to build a pitch deck. How might we help Tom build a pitch deck? Then you start thinking around that, right? So that's how it works. You want to break the larger challenge up into smaller actionable pieces. Now, the way of doing that, I personally like using lateral thinking. What is lateral thinking? Lateral thinking is a combination of divergent thinking and convergent thinking. It will help us to go broad to build bigger solution sets. Now, the divergent thinking is also known as brainstorming. It's the concept of going from a stimulus to multiple possible solutions, right? The stimulus here being the problem statements that you're trying to solve. And mind you, you can have three user point of views or problem statements that you're trying to solve, and you come up with as many ideas as you can. And here, I like to encourage people to defer judgment. In fact, there's no such thing as weird ideas. The wackier, the better. You want to stay far from the most obvious, the most obvious solutions. Try to think outside the box. The, Going to a horse or animal traction, it's kind of an obvious solution to how to move. I try to think outside the box, right? To come up with an automobile, that type of thing. Then on the other side, you have convergent thinking that uses more logic. You use the data available to you, the facts, and so on and so forth. This is where you do your desktop research. This is where you do book reviews and so on and so forth. Learn as much as you can on the topic and then make informed decisions. Then it's about combining the two. So you're going broad and then coming narrow, and then broad again and then narrow until you reach that sweet spot. That sweet spot there. There are various techniques of brainstorming, of coming up with ideas. We're not going to go through all of them. I just listed a few of them here, but I want to bring to your attention that I actually, if you notice carefully on your left hand side, bottom left hand side, you will see prototype as also a tools for ideating. Now, I've mentioned earlier on that prototype is one of the 5 stages of design thinking, but prototype itself, as you're busy creating a prototype, you might have more ideas. That's why we also say that it's also an ideation tool, right? Just wanted to bring that to attention. Yeah, and then again, you can have different sort of innovation sprints, but while for instance doing brainstorm, my favorite is the Lotus Blossom. I want to tell you a little bit about the Lotus Blossom. The Lotus Blossom, basically, it's an idea that comes from the Lotus Blossom, which is a plant that has 8 petals, And the concept here is to put the problem, how might we, at the center, and then the eight petals there, each eight petals, you would write an idea that pertains to the problem that you're trying to solve. Whatever comes to mind, you write it there. It's cool if you're working in a team because then it's diverse. Whatever idea someone gives relating to the problem at hand, you put it on one of the petals. So you're going to end up having eight ideas for each one of the eight petals. And then you take each one of these ideas, you make it the center of a new lotus blossom, and you repeat the exercise. It's a quick way of coming up with 64 ideas just like that. Then you can keep on going and have as many ideas as you can. And then in the end, you're going to start seeing um, patterns and grouping things together. You see clusters, and then you're going to easily group things, group clusters, and come up with maybe the top three ideas, general themes that you want that best matches the problems that you've identified earlier on the user point of view. Then from there, you can move on to the next stage, which is prototype. And here, I'm not talking about spending a lot of money to create your first car, your first prototype. It's about low risk prototype. Can you draw it on a piece of paper? Can you use cardboard to show me what it is so that I can give you feedback? Can you, you know, give me a visual representation of it? The idea is to get feedback from the potential users. And you want to keep this formula in mind here. If you remember anything from everything that I've said, I know it's a lot of information. Remember this formula: maximum amount of learning over minimum amount of cost. So you want to learn as much as you can at the least cost possible. And cost, obviously, it always boils down to money, but cost comes in various forms. It could be in terms of time, energy, and so on and so forth, right? And that's the idea of low risk, rapid prototyping. You want to learn as much as you can at the lowest cost possible. And there are tools that you can use even online. I am a web developer. I use Balsamic, for instance, to develop uh, quickly scribbles and sketchy things, and to show someone a quick design of what the front end of the web application is going to look like. Then we can quickly make adjustment before I even start writing any piece of code. So that's the idea. It saves me time, saves me energy, saves me my money. I could, instead of me writing code and then going back there and finding out that's not actually what they wanted. Right. And then your last stage is testing. Well, testing again, that's where the whole lean concept comes in. You want to put your product out there as often as possible, get feedback, improve, measure, improve on it, put it back out there. That's the whole idea. You want to have as much feedback as you can, right? And from here, you can easily determine whether you need to go to mass production or whether you need to go back to the drawing board or whether you need to go back to stage one, empathizing again, or redefining the problem, or coming up with new ideas, right? And it helps you to get people involved, right? Remember, we said design thinking is a human-centered approach, so it helps you to keep the target user, the potential customer, as part of the design process itself, right? I just want to re-emphasize here: come with a beginner's mindset. Do not ask people leading questions, because the danger here is that you spend this much time empathizing with people, you spend this much time coming up with all sorts of ideas, and then you've spent time creating a prototype, and now you're almost convinced that this is the right solution, and you're trying to convince other people as well that this is what you need because it's your baby, right? But you still want to come with a beginner's mindset and ask yes and yes and don't try and defend your arguments, or you defend the reasons why you designed that way. Yes and that's what it is, right? So that brings us to the end of the design thinking process, the five stages, and how one can use it to validate hypotheses. Remember the definition of a startup by Steve Blank: a series of untested hypotheses. And so this process helps you validate those hypotheses. Your job as an entrepreneur, basically, you have a series of hypotheses. Hypotheses are assumptions, right? Your first assumption being that the problem that you've identified is actually a big enough problem for people that they want to pay someone to solve that problem. So that's your first assumption. It's your first hypothesis. You need to validate that. The second hypothesis is that the solution that you have is the most optimal and what people want, and people would adopt it. You also need to validate that. So you would see in the early stage, of a startup, it's a lot of validation that needs to be done. And design thinking is a powerful tool, as you have now just seen, that can help you do that. So I want to bring it all together and show you that with the information that you now have, you can create a simple business model canvas. So you have your user point of views there, you can have three, and you add the value propositions associated to each one of the user point of views, revenue models, how you're going to make money, the implementation model, and the cost associated to each one of these problem statements. And then you have a business model canvas that you can start off like that. Of course, there are various types of advanced business model canvas that you can find on the internet. This is it's a very, very simple representation of that. There's the more advanced ones that you can find on the internet. And as I promised, I want us to look at the case study of a startup, a group of people that use design thinking process to come up with really cool solutions. So this startup is called EarthEanable. I encourage you to look them up on the internet. EarthEanable started with a dream to improve health outcomes through simple and affordable solutions, right? Traveling to Rwanda with the Stanford class entrepreneurial design for extreme affordability in 2013, four Stanford University were tasked with the partner organizations in Rwanda to come up with the best solution, right? That would help because that helps people in Rwandan have a flow that does not come with all sorts of challenges, including sicknesses and things of that nature. What you need to know, the motivations behind this is that about the time where they started this business, 70% of Rwandans were living in houses with dirt floors. And dirt floor, a house with dirt floor is exactly what it sounds like, what you can imagine. It's a dirt floor, and when it rains, there's puddles, and then breeding mosquitoes and bringing all sorts of sicknesses, and that's a problem. Somebody needed to take care of that. So they first sought to understand how suboptimal homes affected physical and emotional health outcomes, and were shocked to discover the significant health problems that dirt floors cause. Eliminating a dirt floor from the home results in dramatic reductions in childhood asthma, diarrhea, malnutrition, and parasitic infestations. So they realized that they could change lives if they found a way to flow Rwanda. And so they went back after getting out of the comfort zone, empathy building, empathizing. They went to Rwanda, they went to the rural areas, they lived there. They saw the world through the lenses of the potential users, the target users. They went back to the US for some ideations and prototyping, and they came up with these innovative solutions of creating these flows that are made with a mixture of cheap oil that one of the team members developed, and add a mixture, and then they created these beautiful flows. The thing is, people could not afford cement or pavement; it's just too expensive. So they needed a cheaper way to still live in a decent manner, and they did that, and they managed to flow many homes in Rwanda. And to this day, they've been invited to Uganda to do the same thing. So this is an example of how people use design thinking to tackle a real life problem, a big problem, in the same time changing people's lives and making a big impact. And this is the power of design thinking. In closing, I'd like to leave you with these remarks from the book Zero to One by Peter Thiel. It says, the next Bill Gates will not build an operating system. The next Larry Page or Sergey Brin won't make a search engine. And the next Mark Zuckerberg won't create a social network. If you are copying these guys, you aren't learning from them. All right. Thank you so much for your time. I hope this was insightful. I hope you've learned something useful about design thinking and how to apply it to validate hypotheses. I would like to ask you to connect with us. If you've enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and leave a message in the comment sections. And we would really love to engage with us. You can connect with me. My email is daniel@malovaconsulting.com. If you have any further questions or would like to engage further, and I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you and goodbye.